What if Lucifer from Hazbin Hotel was reborn with all his memories, not reset, not softened, but fully aware from the first second he opens his eyes? Because that single change flips everything you thought you knew about his character and the entire structure of hell. And you need to understand this clearly. Lucifer is not just strong, he is ancient, experienced, and painfully aware of his own failures. So giving him a second life with full memory is not a small tweak. It is a complete rewrite of his behavior, his decisions, and the future of every character around him. And the moment he wakes up, there is no confusion phase. No slow realization. He knows exactly what is happening. He recognizes the environment. He understands the timeline. And more importantly, he remembers how things go wrong if he follows the same path. And that instantly forces him into a different mindset. Because this time he is not reacting to events. He is preparing for them before they even begin. And that makes him dangerous in a way he never was before. Because old Lucifer had power but lacked direction. He was detached, careless, almost bored of everything around him. But this version has purpose, and purpose combined with power creates control. And the first major shift you would notice is how he handles authority. Because instead of sitting back and letting hell run itself into chaos, he starts tightening his grip early, not through loud displays of strength, but through calculated moves, quiet influence, and strategic pressure on key figures. And that changes the entire political balance. Because characters who once had freedom to act now find themselves limited, observed, and subtly contained. And someone like Alastor becomes a perfect example of this, because Lucifer already knows the kind of threat Alastor can become. He understands his patterns, his ambition, and his unpredictability. So instead of waiting for him to grow into a problem, he deals with him early, not by destroying him outright, but by placing him in a position where his actions are controlled, monitored, and redirected. And that creates a completely different dynamic between them, because instead of chaotic independence, you now have a tense relationship built on mutual awareness, where both sides know the other is dangerous. But neither makes the first reckless move, and that alone sets the tone for the rest of hell. Because when the strongest figures are playing cautiously, everyone else feels it. And then you move into the emotional core of this scenario, which is Charlie. Because this is where things become deeper than strategy. Because Lucifer remembers every mistake he made with her, every time he dismissed her ideas, every moment he chose distance instead of connection. And that regret does not disappear, it becomes a constant weight on his decisions. But here is where it gets interesting, because this version of Lucifer does not respond to that regret in a purely emotional way. He turns it into action, into calculated support. Because now he understands that Charlie's dream of redemption is not naive. It is powerful, it is disruptive. And if handled correctly, it has the potential to change the entire system of hell and even challenge heaven itself. So instead of opposing her hotel idea, he backs it from the start, but not blindly. He structures it, he protects it, he ensures it survives long enough to prove its value. And that changes Charlie's journey completely, because now she is not fighting alone. She has support from the most powerful being in hell. But at the same time, that support comes with a level of control that creates tension. Because Charlie starts to question whether her father believes in her dream or is simply using it as a tool. And that question becomes a key conflict, because from Lucifer's perspective, he is doing both. He genuinely wants to fix his relationship with her, but he is also fully aware of the strategic value of her project, and balancing those two motives becomes one of his biggest challenges. Because leaning too far into strategy risks damaging their relationship again, while leaning too far into emotion risks repeating the same mistakes that led to failure in the first place. And that tension extends into his relationship with Lilith as well. Because Lucifer remembers exactly why things fell apart between them. He understands the missteps, the misunderstandings, and the deeper issues that were never resolved. But instead of trying to force a reunion, he takes a different approach. He observes, he keeps his distance. He allows space for things to develop naturally. And that creates a colder but more controlled dynamic, because now both of them are operating with awareness. And that awareness removes the unpredictability that once defined their relationship. And then you look at the larger impact on hell itself. Because a Lucifer who is aware of his past failures does not allow the same level of disorder to continue unchecked. He introduces systems, he creates structure, he begins shaping hell into something more organized, more efficient. And that is where things start to escalate, because hell is built on chaos. And when you introduce order into a system that thrives on disorder, you create resistance. Because there are countless demons who benefit from the lack of structure, who thrive in unpredictability, and Lucifer's changes threaten that. So opposition begins to form, not openly at first, but in small, subtle ways, hidden alliances, quiet defiance. And what makes this version of Lucifer effective is that he expects it, he anticipates resistance. And instead of shutting it down immediately, he lets it grow just enough to reveal who is involved. Because information is more valuable than immediate control. And once he has that information, he acts decisively, removing threats before they become unmanageable. And this creates a version of hell that feels completely different. Because instead of constant chaos, you have controlled tension, a sense that everything is moving according to a plan, even when it appears random. And then you bring heaven into the equation. Because this is where the stakes reach their peak. Because Lucifer remembers how heaven operates. He understands their rules. their limitations, and their blind spots. And that knowledge gives him an advantage that no one else in hell possesses. Because while others see heaven as an untouchable authority, Lucifer sees it as a system with flaws, and those flaws become targets. And this is where Charlie's redemption project becomes more than just a personal mission. It becomes a direct challenge to heaven's ideology. Because if sinners can be redeemed, even in small numbers, it questions the entire foundation of heaven's judgment system. And Lucifer knows this, so he pushes the project forward carefully, ensuring it gains attention, ensuring it cannot be ignored. And what makes this approach effective is that he is not attacking heaven directly. He is forcing it into a position where it has to respond. And when it responds, it exposes its weaknesses, and that is where Lucifer gains the upper hand, not through brute force, but through strategy, through understanding and through patience. And this shifts the entire narrative, because now the conflict is not just about power, it is about ideology, about systems, about control. And every character is affected by this shift, because the environment they exist in is no longer random, it is deliberate, it is shaped by a ruler who is constantly thinking ahead. And the biggest question that runs through all of this is whether Lucifer can truly change. Because having memory does not guarantee growth, it only provides the opportunity for it. And throughout this scenario, you would see moments where he struggles with that, where his old habits resurface, where his pride and his tendencies push him toward the same mistakes. And those moments are critical, because they show that awareness alone is not enough. Change requires consistent effort, and failure is always a possibility. And if he fails this time, the consequences are even greater, because now every mistake is made with full knowledge of what it leads to, and that adds weight to every decision he makes, because there are no excuses left. And that is what makes this version of Lucifer so compelling. Because he is not just powerful, he is responsible. Every action carries meaning. Every choice has consequences, and that responsibility shapes the entire world around him. And when you look at the long-term outcome of this, what if? It all comes down to balance. Because Lucifer is walking a line between two extremes, between control and chaos, between strategy and emotion, between being a ruler and being a father. And maintaining that balance is the hardest part of his journey. Because leaning too far in either direction creates problems. Too much control turns him into something cold and disconnected. Too much emotion risks repeating the same failures that led him here in the first place. And finding that middle ground is what determines whether his second chance leads to something better or something worse. And that is why this scenario works so well. Because it is not about a simple victory or defeat. It is about transformation. About whether a character who knows all his past mistakes can actually avoid repeating them. And whether that knowledge is enough to change not just himself, but the entire system he exists within. And when you think about it like that, Lucifer being reborn with all his memories does not just affect his story, it reshapes everything, every relationship, every conflict, every outcome. And that is what makes it such a powerful what if. Because it takes a character who already holds immense power and adds something even more impactful, awareness. And when you combine those two things, you do not just get a stronger Lucifer, you get a smarter one, a more dangerous one, and potentially a better one, depending on the choices he makes.